Hello, Sisters in Crime. I'm Mindy Quigley, and I'm hosting today's Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern U.S. time live. So, we're going to be talking today about getting the most out of conferences and meetings. And these short live sessions are here just for you to get a little snippet of fun information in a quick format. And we're going to be joined today by Kristopher Zgorski. Now. So just pause for 1 second while we get Kristopher on the live. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
I sure can. And is everything good on your end tech
It's
wise?
good now. I had it not, I microphone was turned off for Instagram, so I had to go in and update those permissions.
That is not a problem. Yeah, these things are always a little bit glitchy, no matter how many times we do them. But as usual, the unplug and plug it in again method seems to work. So I am delighted to welcome you here today, Kristopher. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to start by introducing you very briefly to anyone who's been hidden under a rock for years and doesn't know who you are. So Kristopher Zgorski is the founder and blogger on Bolo Books, which is a crime fiction book review site. He's a very discerning reader, and if you're somebody who likes all types of crime fiction, following Kristopher on socials and reading the Bolo Books blog is a great way to keep up with books that are coming out. And Kristopher is also an author himself, so he's written short stories, and he's kind of like the short story writer equivalent of the EGOT. So he's got, I don't even know what the acronym would be, but he's won the McCavity, the Agatha, the Anthony Award, plus the MWA's Raven Award, which is just kind of for general awesomeness. So really, really excited to have you here today, Kristopher, to talk about this topic. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much. That's quite the introduction.
Well, we are honored to have you join us here. And of course, you are a Sisters in Crime member. So glad to have you here as a sibling. So let's kick it off, if we could, by you talking a little bit about the types of crime fiction conferences that are generally out there. And this is a little bit US focused, but if you know of any or have been to any overseas, of course, mention those.
Sure thing. Basically, there's two different breakdowns. There's a fan convention and then there are craft conventions. So here in the States, we have the holy trinity of fan conventions, which is BoucherCon, Malice Domestic, and Left Coast Crime. And they're all very similar and different in different ways. BoucherCon is international based, so it brings in a bigger overseas contingent of writers, and it also is a wider breadth of the community, I think, than certainly more than Malice. I don't know about Left Coast Crime. So meaning that we get thriller writers and suspense writers as well as traditional mysteries. BoucherCon is about half the size Malice is about half the size of BoucherCon, and it brings in mostly traditional mysteries with a heavy focus on cozies, although it's not nearly a cozy convention as some people like to call it. It's really a traditional mystery convention. So and over the years, it is expanding and bringing in some more suspense stuff. So I would say to authors who are suspense writers or domestic, any of those categories, thrillers, you can go there. It's just going to be a harder road for you. Left Coast Crime, also about the same size as Malice, and is it does have some international contingent to it, but
Because
it's
it's often
mostly
in really cool places. Left
it's
Coast
always
moves
in great
around and it's
places.
always in really good
And
places.
of course, it's always on the west coast of the states
Yes.
because that's what it is, Left Coast Crime, whereas Malice is always in Bethesda, Maryland, and then BoucherCon moves around all over the country. There are overseas cons. Harrogate is another one that's in the UK. I have not been yet, but it's
I'm going this year. I'm
Oh,
going.
I'm so excited. I
I'm
can't
so
wait to hear
excited.
what you think. I've heard it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah,
I
I'm
have
really stoked.
attended Bloody Scotland digital virtually during the pandemic, and I love that convention. I hope to go someday soon. And I have actually been in person at Iceland Noir, and I highly recommend that.
Ooh.
It's a different con than any of the other conventions. I can't say that it's fan or craft based. It's sort of a hybrid of the two, but it also just runs in a totally different way. And of course, you get to go to Iceland, which you can't beat that. So any of those.
So you and I, this is something you and I are going to talk about at Malice this year, if you're going to be there. But we're both Icelandophiles, or whatever the term would be for that. I've been to Iceland a number of times, and I'm kind of obsessed, and I think you low key
Oh,
are too.
yeah, let's discuss that. So then if we talk about the craft conventions, there's New England Crime Bake, which is actually one of my favorite conventions at all. It's an intimate, and I think you really get to meet all the people that are there, fans and authors. It's just more geared towards connecting, but it's definitely more craft based. I have not been to Killer Nashville. It also is a craft based convention, and the same with Sleuth Fest in Florida. I haven't been there yet, although I'm hoping to go next year. So that's a craft based convention.
Yeah, and I would say for all of these, if you are an aspiring writer, really any of these are going to be a great experience. For readers, probably more the fan ones over the craft ones, but if you're a writer just starting out, really any of these is going to
Any
be
of them,
good
because
bang
as
for your buck.
writers, we're fans too. So any of
Yes.
them will appeal to you. So I say just pick the one, especially if they're close to you. If something is in your area, don't miss the opportunity to go when you don't have to like fly there and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to know, you've been to, as you said, a lot of these conferences. Do you have like a highlight, or you can pick a couple? I know it's hard sometimes just to pick one, but do you have some highlights, and what made that experience or those experiences special?
Yeah, when I knew we were going to do this, I counted them up, and it's roughly 32 that I've been to. I don't know if I got them all, but I've been to a lot of conventions. I would say probably the biggest highlight for me was when I got to interview Anne Cleves for her Lifetime Achievement Award at Malice
Mhm.
Domestic. So huge honor to do that. But it also highlights one of the tips I added that will be posted with this video, in that whenever I go to a convention, I always look at the attendee list and I make sure that I find somebody, some writer that I've never heard of or that I've never read, and I make it a point to read them before we go into the convention. So back at my very first convention, BoucherCon in Baltimore in 2008, Anne Cleves was that person. Raven Black had just come out of the United States. None of the Vera books were available here in the States at that point. That book was out. I read it. I went to her panel, met her afterwards, got the book signed. We started chatting. The next year, I met her at Malice Domestic and started to talk to her. Then somewhere in there was a year where she asked me to do a solo interview, the first solo interview in the United States with her at the Festival of Mystery, which no longer, unfortunately, exists. But that was in Oakmont, Pennsylvania, and I did that interview. And then fast forward 15 years, and she asked me to do that Lifetime Achievement Award. So none of that wouldn't happen had I not read her before going to BoucherCon.
Do you know, that's actually a great point about these conferences, is that I think most of us, even as like I get more established in my career, I very much remember what it was like to go to my first Malice as a nobody from nowhere who knew nothing. And therefore, I think it's, generally speaking, the crime writing community is a friendly one. And I think that's usually pretty true at conferences, that if don't hesitate to go up, especially if you're a fan of somebody's work, and kind of like introduce yourself and make those connections, because even Anne Cleves had to start somewhere. And that,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's great that you were able to make those early connections so that when her career did take off, you know, you had that bond already. And that, I think that's true, like I said, kind of across the board. I've really never been rebuffed, even when I've like totally fangirled Lori King at Left Coast this year, like oozing all over her. She was very, very gracious.
Yeah, I mean, you hear horror stories about people that were approached in the bathrooms and stuff. I've never seen any. Actually, know if that's like just a apocryphal thing that didn't really happen, but that's a no. But anywhere else, just walk up and introduce yourself. Everybody's there for the same reason.
So I've been basically an across the board cheerleader for people going to conferences, but what are some things that people should really consider as they're thinking about signing up for a conference or a writing,
Yeah, I
workshop,
would
anything along those lines?
certainly think about where you are in your career. As you said, if you're a new writer, if your book is not published yet, or you're not even finished writing the book, go to the conventions with a different mindset, and then any of them will really work for you. If your first book is out or you're more established, then you're going to want to make sure you're going to the right convention for the right reason. If you're going to learn a craft and learn how to better make your next book better, then you're going to want to focus on those craft cons where you're going to get some hands-on experience and talk to writers about that. But if you're going to spread your to expand your readership, then the fan conventions are where you want to be. And it's good. I always recommend to writers that you do that before your book is out. Like, get out there and start meeting these people before your book is out, because that's going to pay off when your book actually comes out. And we can see an example of that if we look at Adrian Andover. He was at Malice last year. His first book was not out yet. He made a point of going around meeting everybody there. I ran into so many people who were like, "Have you met Adrian yet?" And I'm like, "Well, he's really making his rounds." And then this year he's nominated for the debut novel. So it
Yes.
pays to go before your book is out if you can. If you can't, then go when your book is out, and that's good too. But you just want to build those bridges early.
Yeah, and it helps to be like Adrian Andover, the most charming imaginable human, because then when
It
you
doesn't hurt.
and speaking of the most charming imaginable humans, I see that Annette Dashafy is in the comments, and she's saying that she misses the Festival of Mystery. So great to have you joining us for the live today, Annette. I wanted to, now we're talking about sneaking into the bathroom, trying to follow, like S.A. Cosby or whoever, get your book signed. What are some mistakes that maybe you've seen or heard of in real life that you would love to warn people against?
The biggest mistake I always tell people is that they put too many eggs in the panel basket. Yes, every time we go to one of these conventions, we want to be on a panel. And it's great when you're chosen to be on a panel, and then the schedule comes out, and inevitably you're at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. That's a heartbreaking thing. Or you look at the schedule and you find out you're up against the guest of honor interview, and that's like deflating. But I always say, don't put all your eggs in that basket, because I know, as both a reader and now as a writer, that you're going to sell more books on the floor walking and talking to strangers in the hallway than you will ever sell from the stage at a panel. And I know this because in 30 of these conventions I've told you I've gone to, and I think I could think of maybe 15, if I'm generous, times I've watched a panel and said, "Oh, after the panel, I've got to go buy that author's book." It just doesn't really happen that often. Usually people go to panels because the person on the panel is somebody they're already a fan of. So don't discount those casual moments in the hallway, at the bar, sitting next to a person at a dinner, or sitting next to a person in the audience at a different panel. Chat them up, get to know them, and tell them what you're writing and who you are. And those encounters are what's going to sell a book, as opposed to just being on the panel.
That's a wonderful tip. And I'm that rare creature, an extroverted writer, that I actually really love talking to strangers, and I'm also shameless, and I'm happy to tell people about the things that I write. But that's a big ask. And I will say though that, like, this is a place where everybody who's there is a reader and writer of crime fiction. So you're in the right place. You've already done sort of the algorithm in real life to funnel these people who are naturally going to be interested in your work. And just start talking to people. Do you have any tips about that?
Yeah, 90% of the people that are there are going to be introverts too. I mean, that's just part of what we are. I mean, like, I'm an introvert too. You would never know it, because when you're at a conference, you suddenly become a different person because you are surrounded by like-minded people. I mean, normally we probably run into occasional people who read as much as we do, but those of us that are at the conference really read a lot, and you're not normally surrounded by that number of people. So you do change, but you've got to be open to that change. But I say, if you are shy and you're not one of those people, and you start a conversation, ask what they're reading, ask who their favorite author are. You're bound to have a connection somewhere along the way,
Right.
if it's a genre or a specific author or whatever, and that will lead to a further conversation, because it is very hard to walk up to a complete stranger. And then I also say, like you said before, always walk up to anybody, but also be conscious of what they're doing when you do that. You don't want to interrupt a business meeting. There are business meetings that happen at these conventions. So if they're at a table and they look like they're deep in conversation about some other topic, you might not want to take that moment to walk up and interrupt them, but hang around. The meeting will end at some point. You can talk to them. or generally you can just walk up to anybody.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I wanted to know, like, for you personally, how has attending meetings shaped you, if it has, as a person, as a writer?
It really has, and I think that every opportunity that has come my way has come because of connections I've made at one convention or another. I mentioned the Ann Cleves things, but there are many examples of that. It's really about networking. The more people you know, the more opportunities that are going to open themselves up to you. You just never know what somebody can do for you down the road, which is why I also say be very careful about burning bridges. You don't want to do anything negative. Like, we all don't get along, but you don't have to make that known. Like, you can just ignore or avoid people that you just clash with for whatever reason, because it's going to reflect badly on you and not that person. So I just say don't burn bridges, and be open to knowing that later in your career, somebody might be able to do something that you have no clue they could do right now for you.
Yeah,
And
hard same on the networking, that every opportunity that I've had, I can trace back to a specific person that I know, I met in person, and almost always at an event like this, or through somebody who I did meet at an event like this. And I think, it's very difficult to break into this business, as we all know. And it's kind of like applying for a job, that if you can have those references and those people who can vouch for you or tell you when an opportunity, oh, did you hear about this short story contest? You might be a good fit for this agent. It's invaluable to have that. Um,
I think it's also important for us to remember that we're also on the other side of that. Like, if you can help somebody else out that you've met along the way, it's incumbent to us to do that. Like, that's part of being the community member. Like, you get the help when you can, and you give the help when you're able to. So keep both of those doors open.
That is wonderful advice and a great place to end on. I'm incredibly serious about talking about Iceland, because I really need to geek out about Iceland with somebody else who really loves Iceland. So let's offline, we're going to make a date for getting a drink and geeking out about Iceland.
Absolutely.
Um, but I really appreciate you taking the time to be here on the Sisters in Crime Live today. And as a reminder to everybody, we do these lives around 1 o'clock every Tuesday Eastern time, US time, and they're just little tips and tricks about writing and writing related stuff. So I'm going to be posting Kristopher Zgorski's 5 tips for getting the most out of professional meetings and conferences in the comments after this chat. And again, thanks to everybody who joined us today. And thanks, Duran, for saying it's a good conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. See you at Malice.
All right, bye.
Bye bye.